Hello, and welcome to Sitter's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be making marmalade. It's very similar to a jam, except for we're not going to be using the whole fruit. We don't want the peels, that's just going to taste gross and very bitter. But we're going to use the zest, the juice, and the pulp. So, let's get into it. Because this is very strong, because I use the zest as well, you do need to add a tiny bit of water to balance it out. If you don't want to use the zest, because it is a lot of work because you have to zest every single lemon and orange, you can just take out all the water and just replace it with the juice. I have the lemon and orange all prepared into here. All I have to do is add that water and the sugar. And just like what I say with my jams, you want this to taste as good as possible, and if you want to be healthy, just use less of it. If you make it less sugar, what will end up happening most of the time is you're not going to taste it on your toast or whatever baked good you're using it for, and you'll end up just putting double, and then it's the exact same sugar and it's just as unhealthy as if you made it normally. This way you can get that nice powerful taste and just put a little bit if you want to have a little bit. So we're going to just mix this up real quick. Because this is a liquid and not berries, it's going to dissolve a lot quicker and you don't have to wait for it to thaw if you're using frozen berries or anything. All you have to do is mix this while it's nice and hot, and then we'll add in our pectin. So let's get this heated up and get started. While you heat up your marmalade, make sure you get your pot of boiling water so you can sanitize your jars. I'm only going to be using large jars this time because I don't sell marmalade too much and it's a lot easier to store it, things like that. And anytime I use it for a baked good or anything, it's a lot better to take it from a large jar than a small jar. But if you like the smaller jars or giving them away for, say, Christmas or something like that, that's the perfect thing you can do with them. A good idea with this type of thing is, any jam to be exact, is get small, like 250 mils or 125 mils, and give them away at like weddings as takeaways. That's a very good gift. So remember, 30 seconds on each side. Once they're done on that side, flip them over and then take them out. We do all of them and then we'll do all the lids at once. Always remember, if you damage this rubber, it won't seal properly, so make sure you're very careful when you're touching this area. But we'll come back when all this is sanitized and this is heated up to put in our pectin. It's now starting to bubble up. You want to add in your pectin now. Unlike with your jams, you're not going to want to skim this because you want the pulp and the zest and all that other good stuff in there. If you skim it, you're going to lose that stuff and it won't become marmalade anymore. It'll be an orange jelly instead. So once you get that in, just mix it up until it starts boiling again. Make sure you take it off the heat or it's going to bubble over. So just move it ever so slightly over and let those bubbles die down for a second. Once they've died down for a second, it'll only take a few minutes. You can start pouring them in. Make sure when you're pouring them in, you try and get an equal amount of juice, pulp, and all that stuff. So what I recommend is while you're scooping that you give it a little mix. That will make sure that there's enough pulp mixed throughout everything. You scoop while you mix, and that will make sure everything's even and consistent. If you don't mix, what will end up happening is all the pulp and zest will float to the top and the very first few will get a ton of pulp and zest, and then the last ones won't. So keep that in mind for when you're pouring. It's been 5 minutes. Most of my bubbles have disappeared, but sometimes the bubbles will last a very long time, and if you're worried that it's cooling down too much and that it might go bad because once it's cooled down it can go moldy, you can skim it, but be very careful. As you can see, there's pulp at the top and some zest. If you do remove that, it's going to be less flavorful and it won't be the same product that it should be. So just keep that in mind when you are taking your time, and hopefully, just like mine, it will die down a lot, but if not, it is okay. Just be very careful. So these jars have cooled down just enough that I can scoop and pour. You see how I scoop twice and then I stir and then I stir, scoop again. And just like with the jams, you're going to want to overfill. That way, as it shrinks, it will create a vacuum sealing your jars. Just like with the jams, it's very hot to tighten the lid fully. So what you're going to do is use warm water. Make sure it's not too cold or you could shatter the glass. But make sure that it's warm or cold enough that it is able to turn. So we're going to just turn this on. And as you saw, I not only tightened it, but I also washed a bit of any sticky parts that were left on it if I spilt or anything. They're all washed up now. With larger jars, you're going to want to wait probably 10 to 20 minutes and then retighten them. As it cools down, the metal will shift around and not be fully tight. So make sure that you do tighten them probably 20 minutes for these larger jars, maybe 10 minutes for those smaller jars. We'll come back then and we'll talk about what you use this for and what I like to use this for. 20 minutes are up. I've tightened them. So what do we use this for? A lot of the times we don't use it for a lot of baking because it's very powerful and it only can have a few niche roles. And one of those roles is when you're making a citrus cake, like an orange cake, lemon cake, or a lime cake, something like that. I like to use this as the moistener. So just like what I do with my strawberry shortcake, how I put a small layer of strawberry jam to make sure that the cake itself is nice and moist, I can do the same thing with this marmalade. Now, just because I'm a bakery doesn't mean you can't use this in everyday use. I love to have this just as on toast, things like that for the morning. But the main uses that you'll have for this in the bakery will be fillings, toppings, things like that, because it is so powerful. You can even put this in some whipped cream or in some custards if you want to flavor your custards or your whipped cream, but make sure that you're not using too much for those purposes because again, this is very powerful. So, if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.